Alright, so for this video, we're going to do Alain Delon, and we're going to see where he will be ranked. Alright, so his overall facial rating is a 7.5. How rare is that? That is 1 in 701 people. The percentile of people is the top 0.1%. His side facial score is 45%. His front facial score is 77%. His total facial harmony score is 64%. His facial dimorphism is 7.25. His body fat factors is 9. His miscellaneous features is an 8.5. We got the tier list to the right side. Tier 1 is ideal. Tier 2 is near ideal. Tier 3 is normal. Tier 4 is a slight flaw. Tier 5 is a flaw. Tier 6 is a huge flaw. And Tier 7 breaks harmony. His overall facial assessment breakdown, let's start off with the best features. So his best features is high set cheekbones, equal facial thirds, low set eyebrows, tight skin beneath the jaw area, good lip protrusion, and a wide neck. His worst features is jaws not sharp enough, closer set eyes, forehead lines, retrusive orbital rims, tiny upper lip, brow bone is protrusive / no brow bossing. His facial dimorphism is worth 20% of his overall score. So let's start off with the ones that he got checks on. So he got a check on neck width, canthal tilt, and eye aspect ratio. He got half for eye aspect ratio. His eyebrow settiness, he got a check for that. Dominant lower third check. Jaw frontal angle, he gets half of that. Brow ridge inclination, nasal projection, and ramus length. His body fat factor is worth 25% of the overall score. He pretty much scored 100 on it. His miscellaneous features is 15% of his overall facial assessment, and he gets a check for forehead lines, so he does have lines on his forehead that are very noticeable. So the first measurement is his eye separation ratio, and he gets a tier 2 for that at 44.1%. So what this means is that his eyes are a little bit closer set. His facial thirds is a tier 1. He does have even facial thirds, and they're evenly distributed. His canthal tilt is highly tilted at 7.5 degrees. 7.5 degrees is perfectly fine. His facial width to height ratio FWHR. So how compact is his facial features of his face? And his is at 1.94. So that is great. His jaw frontal angle is a tier 2. So that's ever so slightly off by 1 degree. So I didn't really deduct too much points for this. And yeah, this is not bad at all. His cheekbone height setness, so he does have high set cheekbones at 90%. 90% is probably the highest that I've ever seen, and I don't think I've rated anybody that has higher cheekbones than him, honestly. His total facial height to width ratio is a tier 1 at 1.36, so his head length is not that long. His bigonial width is a tier 2 at 84%. 84% means that his lower jaw is a little bit smaller than his head width. So if his lower jaw was just 1 or 2% wider, then it would have been within that ideal range. His chin to philtrum ratio is a tier 1 at 2.11, so he does have a good balance between the chin and the philtrum. His neck width is 98%. 98% is ideal, and it makes the face look more masculinized because a thick neck means a thicker base. His mouth to nose width ratio is 1.43. 1.43 is perfectly fine. The nose doesn't flare out too much, or I guess I could say the nostrils doesn't flare out too much, is within the inner canthus of the eyes, and the mouth width is within the inner iris of the eyes, as you can see right there. And he also has close set eyes as well, and they do harmonize with his close set eyes. His mid-face ratio is a tier 2 at 0.92, and that is very, very close to the ideal range at 0.93. So it's only a tad bit off. So this is not really a flaw by any means necessary. His eyebrow settiness is very close at 0.5, so he does have very close set eyes, and this is very masculinizing. His eye spacing, one eye test apart or one width eyes apart, is a tier 4. Like I said again, he does have closer set eyes at 0.86, so that means that his eye width is closer set. His eye aspect ratio is a tier 2 at 2.75. 2.75 means that he is extremely close to having almond-shaped eyes. It's just that his eyes are a bit too rounded. Lower lip to upper lip ratio is a tier 2, or a tier 4, at 2.5. 2.5 is actually the other way around. So his upper lip needs to be a little bit more protrusive than his lower lip. So his upper lip is extremely tiny, like I said before, with his negative flaws, like I stated. And if his upper lip was more longer, then this would have harmonized. So yeah, he doesn't have very long upper lip, but he also does have a cupid's bow, so that kind of helped balance it out a little bit. But preferably you do want to have a more longer upper lip. His deviation from the ipsilateral aliar angle to the jaw frontal angle is a tier 3 at 11 degrees. 11 degrees is not within the ideal range and is not within the tier 2 range. It's slightly outside of that by 1 degree off. And this is due to his jaw being slightly within the ideal range. So like I said again, his jaw angle was 83. If it would have been around 84 or 85, it would have been a tier 2. His eyebrow tilt is a tier 1 at 7 degrees, and he does have perfect tilt, especially for a male. His bitemporal width, so how much forehead exposure does he have relative to his cheekbone width or his head width, and his is at 94%. 94% is literally at the outside of the ideal range, so he barely gets that one in. His lower third proportions is a tier 1 at 31%. 31% means that his lower third proportion is evenly distributed, and he does have proper lower third proportions. And we're going to see from another measurement to identify that as well. His ipsilateral aliar angle is a tier 1 at 94 degrees. 94 degrees is pretty high, but it's still within that ideal range. Anything more than 94 or 95 is going to get you outside of that tier 1. So he does have a good mid-face angle. His gonial angle is a tier 5 at 135 degrees. 135 degrees means that he does have an obtuse jaw angle from the side, and it doesn't make his face look very aesthetic from the side. His nasofrontal angle is a tier 4 at 139 degrees. 139 degrees means that he doesn't have a brow bone or prominent brow bone, or he doesn't really have any brow bossing, as you can see at the top of his brow ridge. So he doesn't have a prominent protrusive brow region. His mandibular plane angle is a tier 1 at 21 degrees. 21 degrees barely makes it in within the ideal plane or mandibular plane angle. So his jaw, or his mandible I should say, is not down swung all the way through, and it's not too flat. It has a good balance in between. So you do want to have a mandible that's not too down swung and it's not too flat. His ramus to mandible ratio is 0.72. He does have a lengthy ramus. His facial convexity from the glabella is a tier 2. His facial convexity is just slightly a little bit rounded. So remember this one is going from the glabella, so the chin to the subnasal to the glabella is 167. 168 would have been within the ideal range, but his is only 1 degree slightly off. His submental angle is 108. That is perfectly fine. He doesn't have a low hyoid bone, and he doesn't have too much loose skin underneath the neck region, and he is also low body fat, so he's not going to have any submental fat underneath the chin. His nasofacial angle, so this is the angle that is created from the nose and the chin. It shows the relationship between these two, and his is 34 degrees. 34 degrees is perfectly fine. He is within the ideal range for this measurement. So he does have a good relationship between those two features. His nasolabial angle, so how upturned or downswung the nose is, and his 108 degrees. So he does have a upturned nose. His orbital vector, so he does have protrusive eyes that bulge out of the orbital rims. So ideally you want to have orbital rims that protrude beyond the eye, which he does not have. The facial convexity is a tier 1 at 142 degrees. That is within the middle of the ideal range, and he doesn't have a very flat facial convexity or a very rounded one. Obviously, the nose protrusion kind of helps a little bit with this one, and the only difference between this and other facial convexities is it adds on the nose as well. His mental labial angle is 107 degrees, and he gets a tier 2 for this. 107 degrees means that it's a little bit tight of an angle. As you can see, it's probably because of his protrusive chin. If his chin wasn't as protrusive, maybe this angle would have been within the ideal range. His facial convexity from the nasion, so this one is going to the nasion, so from the chin to the subnasal to the nasion, and his is at 165 degrees. 165 degrees is perfectly fine, and it's probably because he does have a very high nasal bridge, so that kind of helps contrast his rounded facial convexity, so that kind of helps counterbalance that a little bit. His nasal projection is at 0.58, and 0.58 will get you within that perfect ideal range that you want to be in, and that is a tier 1. So he does have ideal nasal protrusion, and his nasal width to height projection, so how lengthy is the actual nose in the length or the height of the nose itself, and he gets a tier 2 at 0.90 or 90, and ideally you want to get around 88. So he is very close, but he's not there yet. And so this is not going to be too many points deducted for this. His rickets elan, so it goes from the nasal tip down to the chin, and he does have a perfect elan, so his bottom lip is ever so slightly behind that line, and his upper lip is even farther behind that line, so his elan is perfect. His H line goes from the tip of the upper lip down to the chin, and your bottom lip is supposed to barely touch that line, which as you can see, it does. Now, the S line I think is probably like his only flaw with these lip measurements, and is only a slight flaw. And what I mean by his lips are retrusive is, as you can see, both lips are supposed to be touching the line, but it actually does not touch the line because his lips don't protrude as far enough as it should. So that's why he gets a tier 2 for that. His bursal line, or the B line, is a tier 1. And the upper lip is more protrusive than the lower lip as it should, and it also passes the line. The nasal mental angle is a tier 1, so this is also another indicator to see if the nose harmonize with the chin as well, and it also takes into account your facial convexity. It's a little bit different from the nasal facial angle. The facial angle does not, and his is 127 degrees. And I also think it's because of his protrusive chin. His chin is very protrusive, but also what counteracts his facial convexity being a little bit more rounded is that his nasal bridge is also high up too, so that kind of counterbalance that as well. So if he doesn't have a protrusive chin and a high nasal bridge, this kind of would have been below the ideal range, maybe around 122 or something like that. His gonium to mouth relationship, so his gonium bone is where the two vectors meet from the mandible and from the ramus, and the blue line that's on bottom is his gonium bone, and the other blue line that's on top is his mouth line, or where his mouth line is, and his gonium bone is below his mouth line, so he does have an adequate sized jaw for his face. Does he have any recession relative to the Frankfurt plane angle or the nasion? So ideally it should pass the nasion, which it does, and it also passes his glabella or the brow ridge. His brow ridge inclination, so how forward back inclined is your forehead? And his is at 14 degrees. 14 degrees is perfectly fine, so he does have a perfectly fine inclined forehead, and this is also sexually dimorphic as well. His nasal tip is a tier 4 at 137 degrees. Now, it might not seem like his nasal tip is bulbous or rounded, but it actually is. So this can be a very tricky measurement. Like I'm just showing this so y'all can see how his nasal tip is. If you look closely, his nasal tip is kind of rounded and bulbous around the tip of it, so that's kind of why he gets 137 degrees, but it might not seem like it at times. His lower lip to submental plane angle is 103. 103 is actually in the ideal range, and also what the reason why he gets 103 is because, like I said again, his chin is very protrusive and his lips are very protrusive, so it kind of counterbalanced it as well. And also, he doesn't have any submental fat underneath the chin. And it also includes two measurements, which is the submental cervical angle with the mental labial angle. So his mental labial angle was a little bit tight, but that was all right. And he doesn't have any submental fat or loose skin underneath the chin or neck region. So that will also hinder this type of measurement right here. But nevertheless, this is perfect. His inferior third of the face / lower third of the facial proportions is 0.45. And 0.45 is perfectly fine, and this is what's considered to be ideal again. And this is kind of similar to the other lower third proportions measurement. This is just a little bit different. It's another way of how to measure your lower third proportions, and the only difference is not taking the whole lower third. It's only taking half of it. So it's the upper portion divided by the lower portion, and that is giving us this number right here. His S2 line is 61%. So the S2 line is a way of indicating whether you have a malocclusion 1 or a malocclusion 2. And then the bursal line or the B line is the best way to indicate whether a person has a malocclusion 3. So I also do use the B line as well, which he did get a tier 1 for that. So I know that he does not have an underbite. Now, 61% indicates to me that he does have a prominent overbite. And if you don't believe that he does have an overbite, y'all can look at previous pictures of him. He has a prominent overbite. And that will be a class 2 malocclusion, a skeletal class 2 malocclusion. So yeah, his upper teeth are passing his lower teeth. And then the last measurement for this video is the Z angle, and the Z angle is 80. So what 80 indicates to me, all right, so it's still within the normal range, all right, it's still perfectly normal. The only thing that 80 indicates to me is that his lips are slightly retrusive, so it's almost close to the ideal range at 70 to 78 or 75 to 78 degrees. It's almost perfect. The only problem is that his lips are slightly retrusive. Now, he does have this perfect thing right here that a lot of people miss. So with this Z angle, preferably you want your upper lip to touch that line. Preferably you want your upper lip to touch that line. Now, if your upper lip does not touch the line, then you probably don't have the perfect lip proportions. Now, let's say if you're in the ideal range, but your lower lip touches that line, then you don't have the perfect or preferred lip proportions. Now, you do have the perfect lip protrusion, but you don't have the perfect lip proportions, if that makes sense. I know that's kind of confusing, but preferably you want your upper lip to be in front of your lower lip. Now, for him, as you can see, both lips are kind of touching the line, so that is also okay, I guess. But preferably, his lips should be a little bit more protrusive. That's all I'm saying. But it's still within the normal range. Most people can't even get within the 70 to 80 degree range anyway. So as long as you can get within the normal range, that's how I can tell that you have decent lip protrusion. And yeah, so that's pretty much it for this video. And yeah, so make sure to subscribe, make sure to like, and also again, make sure to DM me. And when you DM me, I will send you the instructions so I can rate your face if you want to get your face rated. And yeah, from there. And yeah, I'm out. Peace.